Nearly 17 years ago, shortly after we started this parish, when we were still having Mass at the little Christ Lutheran Church out here in the country, and that was Saturday evening and Sunday morning at Perrysburg High School, there was a couple that started to attend, and they came regularly for several weeks. And finally, one Sunday after Mass, they said, "Father Herb, we need to talk to you. Can we get together this week?" Well, I didn't even have an office at that time, so I allowed them to invite me to their house. And I went there, and it was very pleasant, very cordial. Sat at the kitchen table. They had a plate of freshly homemade cookies and from fresh coffee. By the way, if you haven't noticed, this parish sort of lives off of cookies and coffee. So we sat there and we talked, and beautiful pleasantries, and everything was fine. And then the man just looked straight in my eyes, and he said to me, "But Father Herb, the real reason you're here is we need to ask you an important question. This new parish that we're creating, this new parish, this new church, is this just going to be a feel-good church?" And I know that one part of me wanted to say something snide, like, "Don't you like feeling good?" But I held back. Instead, I said, "Tell me what you mean." Well, they went on to say that they liked coming to the church. They felt at home. They felt their spirits lifted. But they were worried that somehow we were not truly going to represent the Catholic faith, that we were not serious enough, somber enough, heavy enough, that we would be too light on Catholic doctrine and moral teaching. I listened to them, and we had a little good dialogue, and finally I said, "You know what? It's up to you. You have to decide. Come to church, celebrate the sacraments with us, listen to the scriptures that we read, pay attention to the homily, and all the other teachings we have at the church. Find out if that's too much of a feel-good church for you." About a month or two later, they did sign up. They joined the parish. And they were members of the parish for a while, and eventually other circumstances caused them to move. But I often think about that conversation because they were revealing something that a lot of people ask themselves. What is church really supposed to be about? And we get caught in a dichotomy of, on one hand, being very serious and moralistic and heavy and reminding people that you've got to shape up and live right or else. Or on the other side, being very up and exciting and hope-filled and joyful. And there is that danger of possibly being too superficial. But I've discovered it's not an either or, but a both and. We are serious. We're walking the journey of faith, which means carrying the cross. But we are also filled with hope. Today, when we have this reading of the Transfiguration, I think it's one of the most feel-good passages you find in all of Scripture. With the exception maybe of Easter joy itself, where Jesus rose from the dead, what could make you feel better than the Transfiguration? Here are these three apostles that are very close to Jesus, James and John, the brothers of Zebedee, and Peter. And they are up the mountain. And here we have this beautiful image of Jesus in dazzling white, lots of glory, the fulfillment of the Old Testament. You know, the Elijah and Moses representing the law and the prophets. We hear the voice come that says, "This is my chosen son, listen to him." And those apostles must have felt so good. It was a feel-good moment. They felt good. We are obviously following the right person. It had to be a high. It had to be an up. But if you look at Luke's gospel, the very verses before this, just go back just a few verses, and Jesus tells them, "By the way, folks, I'm on my way to Jerusalem, where I will suffer, and I'll be put to death, and I'm going to die." And he says, "Oh, by the way, if you want to be my followers, you're going to have to carry your cross too." So that leads into this high experience. And if you read on, right after the transfiguration, when Jesus comes back down, just a few verses later, Jesus says it all over again. By the way, the Son of Man is going to suffer and die, and you need to be with me on this journey. It's both and. There is a serious component to our faith, of course. And here we are in the most serious time of the year, Lent. And just last week and the week before on Ash Wednesday, we talked about it's a penitential season. And we have to die to ourselves, and we have to let go of the old person so the new person can come about. And we have to get rid of the sin from our life. That's pretty serious. But this passage is inserted to remind us that it's both and. It's serious and it's solemn and it's joy-filled and filled with hope. There is glory. There's the agony and the glory. And I love the fact that those same three apostles, James and John and Peter, who were with on the mountain, were also with Jesus in the agony in the garden. They saw both. We have to have both in our life. But the journey sometimes is hard. And we have to know there is a mountaintop experience. I was sharing the example of a hike I took on a Sunday afternoon some years ago with my sister Judy and her husband Vern. And we really just went to a park for a little walk. And it was an area that we had never been to before. And so as we're walking, and it was kind of hilly country, we took the trail, and there were other people out there. But as we took the trail, we saw a sign that says, "To the top of the hill." We weren't really prepared for a strenuous hike, but we thought, well, why not? It's a beautiful day. So we started following this trail, and it did start going up higher, and it twisted around. And the truth is, because of the terrain, we really couldn't see where it was going. There were little mounds, but you couldn't see beyond that. And a couple of times I thought, is that the top of the hill? But no, the trail took us elsewhere. And finally, we discovered it was getting harder and harder to go, and lots of people who had started had left. In fact, we were among the very few continuing on the trail. And we kept on hiking and going up higher and higher. And then finally we thought, that is the top of the hill. Amazingly, it was covered with a cloud. And so we kept on walking. And there were some boulders at that part. So it got harder. And when we got into the cloud, it was wet. And it was kind of slippery and kind of scary. And eventually, I reached the summit. And I'm not going to brag or anything, but I got to the summit before my younger sister and her husband did. And I got to the summit, and then I made a discovery. I had gone through the cloud, and it was almost like the cloud was only on one side of the summit. The other side was crystal clear. The sun was shining, and I could look out into the valley, and there was a lake down there, and you could see fields, and maybe pretty far out, but you could see a little village. It was the most miraculous thing. The journey of faith sometimes is arduous. It's challenging. It's hard. But there is also the glory. And we have to go through one to get to the other. Is this a feel-good faith that we have? It certainly is. And we feel good, not in spite of the journey there, but because of it. Jesus, who suffered, also rose from the dead. We believe both.